Hello there, I am Mark Sudduth. Now, most of you know me because of hurricanes. After all, the brand is HurricaneTrack. And yes, over the last 20 to 30 years, that has been the primary focus of my work. However, in the last several years, we have really been able to branch out and cover other weather systems, nor'easters, lake effect snow, the desert southwest monsoon, atmospheric rivers in California, and severe weather in the nation's midsection. Now, I've been wondering all along these last several years, what will HurricaneTrack's role be? I mean, after all, we are HurricaneTrack, not Tornado Track. So what are we going to do out there? Is it going to be the tornadoes? Or maybe this other phenomenon called hail? So last year, while we were out there doing what we do, tracking severe weather, trying to figure things out, it sort of dawned on me, we really need to start focusing on that really underreported phenomenon, hail. It's large, it's destructive, it causes billions of dollars of damage every year. And I thought, let's definitely shine a light on this. Let's show people how hail does what it does, show it to them like they've never seen it before. But along the way, let's get some experts and get their opinions. I know there has to be research projects going on, stories from storm chasers that have dealt with gorilla hail on their windshields, people from the airline industry, solar and wind, farmers, the agricultural side, the people that fix your car, the hail dent people, right? Insurance, all of that. That has to be something very interesting, I thought. And indeed, I was correct. So, in this inaugural episode of our new podcast series, and by the way, our project is called The Hail Project. I know, not very original, but hey, not everything has to have some crazy, funky name. The Hail Project will do. And now we have the Hail Project podcast. This will be a limited edition, or a limited series, I guess you would say. 10 or 12 episodes, something like that, from the springtime now into the early summer. And I'm very proud, as the inaugural episode kicks off, to have Dr. Ian Giammanco join me in a wonderful conversation. He and I spoke about everything related to hail, even in his early days studying hurricanes. He's a hurricane guy like me for his roots. It just took me a little bit longer to start realizing that hail is really fascinating. It's cool, but it is also very disruptive and destructive, costing, like I said, a lot of money each and every year. So without further ado, I want to welcome you to our new podcast, the Hail Project Podcast, and my first guest, Dr. Ian Giammanco. All right, everybody, I am so excited to talk to this gentleman that you see here to my left, or however that works on the screen. And I hope I get the name right. I'm going to try it once, and I should nail it. Dr. Ian Giammanco. Did I get it?
Yeah, you got it, Mark. You got it. It's good to see you and great to be here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining me to talk about the next phase of my geographic/meteorological life. First, it was hurricanes, which is still very much a thing. Now it's going to be hail. Now, I've been introduced at numerous talks and conferences over the years, and they've asked me for a bio ahead of time. That's always kind of good. That's fine. But I figured in this case, you know more about Dr. Ian than I do. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again, Mark. I'm like you. I started as a hurricane guy. It was Hurricane Andrew in 1992. I grew up in South Louisiana. Of course, Andrew's last landfall was in South Louisiana, and man, it just got me hooked. I was the piece that really set my weather career on its path, I guess. After that, I had the chance. I went to University of Louisiana Monroe. I played baseball there and studied meteorology. So you see some baseballs back there. So folks who can't see, I've got a couple of old baseballs back on my shelf behind me. And then went on to Texas Tech, where I started to get into how severe weather really impacts the built environment. I actually met my wife there in graduate school at the what is now the National Wind Institute, doing my PhD in wind science and engineering. And that sort of got me into this building environment world. How does weather impact our homes and businesses and things like that? So I am a self-proclaimed weather nerd, just like everybody else out
Terrific.
there that we talk to.
Love it.
But I also get the opportunity to study not only just the impacts of weather and the phenomenon, but also how it impacts our lives from day to day.
Right. And so where are you now in terms of geographic? Where are you doing your Zoom from?
Yeah, I'm here live from Gaithersburg, Maryland tonight. That's where I lived and moved up here a couple of years ago. My wife used to be with us at IBHS. That's the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety.
Right?
She's now the director of disaster and failure studies at the National Institute of Standards and Technology here in Gaithersburg, Maryland. So we are in the proverbial DMV, or just maybe just outside of on the Maryland side. And we've been here just about 2 years now.
So do you get to say those titles about each other at cocktail parties in the DC area? That must be pretty cool.
She,
Very impressive.
her role is far more important than me. But I will tell a little bit of a story on her. I think
Please.
10th day on the job was the Surfside condo
Sure.
collapse in Miami, or near Miami, Florida.
Right.
And her role is basically very similar to the NTSB when there's a plane crash. When there's a building disaster, they go and do the engineering assessments. And
Right.
so that's all going on her 10th day as a Fed. And I have to applaud her for figuring out federal bureaucracy and how to make things
Quickly.
go in a really short window of time.
Are there YouTube videos about that? Because there is for everything else.
Yeah, there might be. We have to search for how to navigate federal spending.
Yeah,
Um,
quickly. Yeah, how about that? Hey, that's a good. Somebody wants to get a 100,000 subscribers quickly. Start a channel about that. How to navigate federal bureaucracy in a pinch. All right, so hurricanes and wind and all that kind of stuff. But I met you because of hail. Now I have heard about you, and you heard about me. In fact, when Valerie Theophanis at Fox Weather said that I'm going to be hopefully coming down to the IBHS Hail Conference. She was like, Dr. Giammanco was very excited that you were coming, etc. So we knew about each other, but when I met you, it was like, wow. And we'll talk about that. But, you know, you went from wind and hurricane stuff, and we'll talk about IBHS too in more detail shortly. And you got into hail. Is that primarily your focus right now?
yeah, so my research work at IBHS really did dive into hail. That was where it sort of started. And one of the reason behind it, when the IBHS Research Center opened in 2010, they knew hail was a peril they wanted to study. For those who don't know, hail damage accounts for about 70% of all the damage from severe thunderstorms every single year. It's not tornadoes or the wind side, it's actually hail. So they sort of turned to my wife and I, who had atmospheric science and engineering backgrounds together, as to how do we build a hail research program. And
Nice.
through that whole process, it sort of became, you realize like hail research had kind of been stagnant. There was some here and
Mhm.
there, and you find your own niche, right? And some of it was the late nights, like, oh my gosh, I gotta go from hurricane boundary layer guy to
Right.
hail expert. So you're staying up reading papers and trying to figure out the whole classic. I just don't want to look like an idiot in front of the severe storms community that I didn't come from. But I found a wonderful community in hail and was able to really help advance the science and the interest from a research sort of renaissance as well. And we're seeing all sorts of great new work showing up from new faculty, young faculty, kind of mid-career professionals, and some great students out there too. So far, so good. It's been a wonderful ride in a peril that I never would have thought back in graduate school that I'd be doing research on.
So let's step back a little bit and let's talk about that for, is it an acronym? Maybe it is, but what is IBHS?
Yeah, so IBHS, we are if you most people out there do know the Highway Safety Institute that does car crash tests. Well,
Right.
IBHS is the building science equivalent of that. It's funded through the property insurance industry, just like IIHS is on the auto side. And our job is to put buildings, building systems, building materials to their severe weather tests.
Hmm.
That is our role. And then to also look for solutions to reduce damage.
Right. And that's
Um,
called mitigation, right?
that's right. That's how we refer to as mitigation. We can call it being more resilient to severe weather, whatever. But that is the role of IBHS. And the mission statement that's on our wall
Saw
has to
that.
do with trying to break the cycle of damage, disruption, the displacement that comes, unfortunately, over and over again with severe weather that we see time and time again. And that's our job, is to try to figure out how to make our built environment stronger so that 20, 30, probably more like 50, 60 years from now, these events are more like bumps in the road rather than the big disrupting catastrophes that they are today.
That's a good way to put it, because that cycle just seems ever going. And sometimes, and I try to be careful because I want to be sympathetic to people's, what they're going through, but something will happen. I'll be like sarcastically on social media, oh, if there was only a way that we could have known about this particular event days in advance, and a way to get information out to people, radar scope, whatever. It's sarcastic, but it's like everything's at our fingertips to know what's coming. But if our buildings are not built for it, all the warning in the world isn't going to help.
Yeah, I think, we've sort of reached that critical mass point where we've made such great advances in the meteorology side.
Sure.
But we have decisions in the building code world that were made 20, 30 years ago that we're paying for right now. And for
Good point.
folks in people's homes, you don't know that. Like it
Right.
shouldn't take an engineer or a PhD to decipher what building code you're under. And far too often we see that play out where decisions that were made 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they come to pass now. And unfortunately, people suffer.
Is
Um,
that a legislative lobby, like monetary? It's got to be all about the money. I don't want to.
Yep. So that's usually the big argument. Building codes, for those who don't know, it's regulated at the state level usually, but a lot of places it trickles down even to local jurisdictions. So there's about, I think, 17 states that have a statewide and uniformly enforced building code that state government takes care of. There's another set of states that has a state code, but then lets local jurisdictions do it all. And then there's other states that don't have a state code at all, and it's purely, hey, local towns,
Right.
counties, do what you want. That's it. And that's sort of the state. It's kind of a patchwork of kind of a moth-eaten
Yeah.
quilt is sort of how I'm been describing it lately. So that's where it comes to. But there's always a cost. There's a cost, and we
Mhm.
don't need to shy away from it. It's
Right.
never created doom and gloom in the housing market.
Right.
Um, and some of it is, do we pay some now or pay
Mhm.
dearly later?
Yeah, that
Is
Midas commercial. Wouldn't you pay me now or pay me later?
yeah,
You remember that?
yeah, and unfortunately, the severe weather will find those weak
Right.
spots. It will find where we made poor decisions, even if it was 30, 40 years ago. The weather finds it, unfortunately.
So at the National Tropical Weather Conference that just took place in South Padre Island, I'm assuming you know Tim Marshall.
Yep, Tim is a legend in our
Exactly.
world
That was
of
rhetorical.
meteorology and engineering. I mean, Tim's one of the first that really helped combine those two disciplines together, along with some others. But Tim really put a spotlight on it, and being such a good communicator, that helped also generate the interest in how atmospheric science and engineering can come together.
He is remarkable, and we learned more about him at that conference. And one of the things that he helped to do was the also legendary Josh Morgerman, who goes into hurricanes. I use these and that. Josh uses himself basically and goes in and gets the amazing stories and footage and the pressure readings. And so he fell in love with Mississippi in the last few years and built a house in Bay St. Louis and has fortified it. And it's really remarkable. And he worked with Tim Marshall to make sure things were going to be to code and beyond. And it was just incredible as Josh went through his presentation to see what efforts he went to for extra bracing beyond anything that I had ever even thought of. And I was starting to think about it because Tim chimed in too. Like, I remember watching a little bit when this house was built here in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm thinking, man, I bet it doesn't have anything close to that. It's probably just minimum code stuff. Now we're talking hurricanes and wind. We're eventually going to get to hail, but um, it was just kind of like a little bit unnerving. Like, man, Josh has got this impenetrable house. It's like tight, and the wind can't mess with it. He's very confident it could still be, subjected to storm surge. I was thinking about all the homes that aren't built anything close to that, even in the last 5 to 10 years in the coastal areas. And again, that's hurricanes and wind, but does that also kind of apply to hail and roofs? This is a good way to segue into that. So,
Yeah, so it applies across the board to how we build and to build to the hazards that we face. So we'll start, take hurricanes, for example. Our building codes have made great advancements. And Josh actually added a whole bunch of the elements of our fortified home program to
oh
his
yeah,
house,
he
which is
mentioned you guys too. I
fantastic.
was like, yeah, I know them. I felt
Yeah.
like
And, and
Al
so that
showed
there are
him.
places like coastal Alabama where that is the building code, is to build to that standard, or the Florida building code, which is one of the best in the country, where new construction, really from 2002 to now, anything that's built in the Florida Peninsula is basically built to that fortified standard. But you could flip that around and look places where you have an older building stock. Great example, Southwest Louisiana, Hurricane Laura,
Mhm.
older building stock, pre-modern codes, no fortified, and you're going to have a catastrophic event. It's
Right.
going to happen. We
Yeah.
watch it play out in tornadoes
Oh yeah.
a lot of times.
Yeah.
And then you throw in hail on top of it. And we don't have a building code provision for hail.
Right.
We just seem to have decided to accept billions of dollars in damage every single year and haven't done or even attempted to do anything except for one place. And
Right.
it's Fort Collins, Colorado, the only city in the country with have a hail provision in their building code.
How big is the hail there usually on average? Is there is it a problem or is it all kind of small or like
So
why
the
Fort
front,
Collins?
yeah, the front range of the Rockies sees a high hail frequency, not as quite in terms of the large and significant severe as say the I-35 corridor. But
Right.
what happened was they had a big event in 2017 and 2018. They had also put in a green building initiative, which was trying to reduce the amount of building waste that was part of that green building initiative. So they were tired of throwing roofs into
Yeah.
landfills repeatedly.
Sure.
They had this green building initiative and they had a big hailstorm, and they just decided to go ahead and do it. And it's been enforced for now about 6 years. You have to have an impact rated roof, whether if it's a new build or a re-roof, you're required to. And we're actually doing a study, just about to start one, to look at how effective that code provision has been and
Mm.
potentially reducing damage and even helping maintain a good insurance market, because hail out there is going to drive a lot of the affordability and a lot of the access problems that we're starting to see now.
And speaking of that, I just got 2 emails in the last couple of days from Chase, who has my mortgage sold from somebody, sold from somebody. You know how that works. Now it's held through Chase. And they were like, we paid your insurance. And one of them was wind and hail. And it was like almost 3 grand. And I'm like, dude, it was like 1,800 a year or two ago. And I haven't had a claim. And then my regular homeowners came in. That was $800 a month a couple of years ago. And this one was like 1,250. I'm like, what are we doing? And I guess what we're doing is we're throwing roofs in
Yep.
landfills and throwing entire communities in landfills because they're getting blasted by hurricanes and other severe weather.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's exactly right. We're just throwing building materials away. Um, I am not of the opinion that your roof should be disposable. I
sure.
think there's
I
materials
agree.
we can do.
Right.
And somebody's got to foot that bill. And
Right.
unfortunately, this is just the situation we're dealing with. Like, we're coming off a almost $60 billion severe storm loss year. That's a record.
Last year,
Um,
I
just
was
last year.
stunned when I heard that at the conference. I couldn't believe it. One of the scientists there had mentioned that. I was like, he said billion and it was 60. Like, what? And then it said insured losses. So that means somebody's got to pay for that. And that somebody would be the customers, the people, lots of people having to foot higher bills.
That's right. And I look at, think about with hail, a lot of, I talked to some of my friends who live in Norm and work at the National Weather Center and OU and all that. And, their deductibles are creeping past $5,000. And some of
Yeah,
them, the bigger the home, I mean, you're going to close in on $10,000.
right.
And that's going to be an out of pocket thing
Exactly. Flipping
every
from my
four or
wallet, I was like,
five
yeah, that's
years.
cash, so
Yeah.
to speak. Yeah. You got to
This
open.
is this is not sustainable, both for us as people and the industry as a whole. We're going to have to figure out a way to get this under control.
Agreed. All right. So let's talk about hail specifically. And let's start at the beginning. for people that might be wondering, just tell me, what is hail? Why do we have it? How does it form?
Yeah, hail. So hail's those big balls of ice. I guess they're not actually balls. They're more like
Sure.
hamburger bun shapes or things that come out of severe thunderstorms. We consider severe hail anything that's an inch or bigger. But
Okay.
hail forms in really some of the stronger, more organized thunderstorms that we see. It often starts out as sort of a glob of a melted snowflake. We could call it a piece of grapple that sort of falls into the thunderstorm updraft.
Is it a little
But
bit soft
then,
when it
yeah,
starts?
they're soft. They kind of look like Dippin' Dots.
Right.
I call grapple nature's Dippin' Dots.
Sure.
But that's what they look like. It's a great visual, and those get ingested in the sort of the backside of the thunderstorm. Then they start their process of collecting ice and other snowflakes, other pieces of ice, super cooled water. So that's water that exists below 32 degrees.
Right.
And then all it's doing as it's traversing that updraft, both moving with the horizontal flow that's moving through the thunderstorm and then going up
Right.
with that column of air that is the updraft of the thunderstorm. And it's just collecting this stuff and it's growing while it's doing that. And then eventually it will either sort of get flung out by the environmental wind or it gets so big, it gets heavy enough that the updraft can't support it. So if you take the largest hailstone that's fallen in the US, the Vivian, South Dakota stone that was about 8 inches plus in diameter, which is mind blowing. And it's somewhere, actually, I don't think I have an example back on the shelf there. I've got some other 3D printed stones, but that updraft is somewhere between 90 to 100 miles an hour. That's air going straight up.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of blows your mind when you stop and think about it. The amount of volume of air that's moving up
Right.
to
To hold
hold
that.
that hailstone
Right.
aloft.
How much did it
And
weigh?
so it was a few pounds. Like
Sure.
once you get a hailstone that's over a couple of pounds, like that's pretty substantial.
Absolutely.
Um, but and that's how hail forms. And it used to be we thought that hail made these sort of looping paths through the
Yeah.
thunderstorm. Well,
Yeah.
it really doesn't. They take sort of these arcs that kind of arc up through the updraft and then back around. And sometimes with supercells that have that rotating updraft, they can kind of start to make that corkscrew shape a little bit, all the while collecting water, other ice,
Right.
all those particles that help that hailstone grow. And there was a modeling study a few years ago that suggested like one long track supercell produces more hailstones aloft than there are trees on the planet, which is kind of
Oh,
amazing to think
back.
about. All that ice being suspended. And we
Wouldn't.
had one of these the other day. The supercell tracked across like Iowa,
Yeah.
Indiana, Illinois. And I'm thinking, man, that's the one. That's that case. Oh,
That's incredible. Wow. All right. I mean, I'm just going to get so excited about this. It's such an amazing thing. I remember seeing hail as a kid in Eastern North Carolina. It was always pretty small. It was a novelty. Oh, look, there's some hail out there. Ping, 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 ping. No big deal. But there's areas in the country where it is a really big deal. So is there a hail alley, so to speak? Where's the worst geographic area or the most favorable area for severe hail?
so it's the old school, what we used to call Tornado Alley, the Great Plains, is really Hail Alley.
Makes
And
sense.
yeah, and if you look at where the most 2 inch hail, the report density of 2 inch or greater hail, it is right smack down the axis of our old school Tornado Alley of the Great Plains. So think about going from all the way from sort of western and central Nebraska all the way through, west central Kansas, all the way to the Texas Panhandle. And then you take sort of the eastern bound of the most in the higher concentration of big hail reports is the I-35 corridor. So
Right.
Wichita,
Absolutely.
Oklahoma City, Dallas, Waco, Austin, San Antonio.
Interesting, you
And
named some pretty big cities that are sprinkled along the I-35 corridor. Wow.
yes, and that is one of the reasons why our dollars just keep
Yes.
going up and up and up and up.
So we'll jump around a little bit as I think of things. We talked about all these different cities along there, and you ended, I think, with San Antonio. They had, and you might remember the year like I remember hurricanes. It was like 16 or 17, somewhere around there, maybe even 15. A singular $1 billion something disaster from hail in San Antonio. What year was that, and like what happened?
Yeah, 2017 was a big year. Although yesterday, not quite as bad as of Mark and I recording this podcast. There was a big hail event in Austin, but in 17, San Antonio got a single supercell went right down the axis of town. And this is producing 2.5, 3 inch hail, which is going to do in most roof covers. There's a lot of tile roofs that you hit the threshold, you're cracking tiles by the time you're upwards of 3 inches. Um, and you run that right over one of our big city suburbs, and it is now a certainty you're going to hit the $1 billion mark.
Sure.
Same year we had the Denver event that was over $2.5 billion. That went
That's
another one. Supercell went right smack down the axis of Denver, right through the residential areas. Um, and now it's become this certainty. We've built bigger homes, but we put more of them on smaller lots. That's
The
more
density.
building materials. The targets have just gotten big. I mean, think about, Brian Wood, a fellow meteorologist who's at American Modern Insurance. Brian's a good friend. He uses this analogy. It's like death, taxes, and hail in Denton County, Texas.
Yeah.
And it could be applied. You could say just Dallas, or you could even say Wichita or Oklahoma City or Denver. It all applies. And a lot of places around those cities that 20, 30 years ago were often farm or ranch land,
Mhm.
they are big old dense suburban neighborhoods these days. And
Hail
that
madness.
becomes a lot of asphalt, a
Mhm.
lot of vinyl siding that's got to get replaced year after year.
Interesting, because Bill Reed, former director of the National Hurricane Center, refers to a lot of the coastal building as hurricane bait, and he'll look at all that hurricane bait out there. So we've built, hail bait, hurricane hail, whatever. We're building into the path of these natural hazards. Um, all right, so lots of $1 billion and the 2 point something billion. What was that, Denver?
Yeah, Denver upwards 2.5 plus. If you sort of adjust that to today's dollars, it's in the top five of costliest hailstorms in U.S. history.
So what is the costliest, by the
So it's
way?
actually one that occurred in Phoenix, of all places,
I'm
Phoenix, Arizona. And here's a unique
What?
reason why.
I got to hear this.
So think about the desert
I
southwest
love
and our
that area.
flat roofs.
It's
Beautiful,
so
beautiful. Well,
right.
we love to put HVAC systems out there on roofs.
Ah,
A
yes.
lot of the condenser units are on roofs. Well, what happened when you ran the 1 in 50 year hail event over Phoenix? You
Gosh,
not only damaged flat roofs, a lot of tile, you also did in a whole bunch of HVAC units
sure.
all at the same time. And that is a damage amplifier. When you take something like that and tear it up, and you have to, in place, in mass, replace HVAC systems in a place that absolutely better have air conditioning.
Yeah.
Um, and
When
that
was
is how Phoenix rises to the top.
right? When did that happen?
So this was back. It was in the 2010s. I don't know the year exactly off the top of my head. I wish I had it just handy. Yeah, a couple things. Dallas Fort Worth is the home to the most $1 billion events. I think they're going on about five now over the last 2 decades. St. Louis is another place that's seen multiple $1 billion hailstorms. Denver, obviously, and then yeah, right at the top is Phoenix. I
Phoenix.
have a hunch we could top it given the growth, especially across like the Dallas Fort Worth metro.
Yes.
A couple of supercells off the dry line kind of scenario go right through, the heart of the suburbs. I think you could top that Phoenix event these days. It hadn't happened yet, but
Right.
it's probably coming.
Time, right. So putting that into perspective, how many $1 billion plus tornado events have we had? If you can,
So that's, tornadoes to get to the $1 billion mark, you're going to have to run over a metro. We can think about Joplin, obviously, for certain.
right.
2011 Super Up Lake, Tuscaloosa for sure. We've also got the assortment of Moors. One
Yeah.
of the Nashville tornado a couple of years ago either hit it or was just under. But a tornado event to get to the $1 billion mark, because it's still such a small phenomenon. Even the large tornado events, mile wide wedge events,
Right.
not that common, but that's still tiny in the
Right.
grand scheme of
Right.
working from a hurricane that's gigantic to the hail swath part of a supercell to the tornado. So to get a $1 billion tornado event, you're going to have to go over a legitimate sized community to reach that mark. Most fall in the tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, but you run one right over a metro area and you'll hit that $1 billion mark.
So it's interesting. Some things come to mind. Tornadoes more deadly than hail, I think for obvious reasons, and it also um, it's more like a surgical strike with a tornado, and more like being carpet bombed, almost literally, bombs of hail, right, from these hailstorms. Um, and I'm again just thinking randomly here as these things come up to into my head. Do you have typical? Is a tornado typically going to have hail in its circulation? That would be bad.
So,
Or does
so
bad
there's
enough?
a
Hopefully
yeah.
not.
So the analogy, the carpet bombing analogy, maybe just I smiled but thought I was like, man, that's actually real. And that's a good way to look at it. So most of our big hail events do come from supercells.
Right.
There's sort of a running hypothesis that some of us scientifically have, especially the supercells that are cyclic, where they're producing a tornado, they stop, they cycle, they do it again, that oftentimes we're starting to notice that hail production starts to slow down in that supercell when they become tornadic. We also know that the wind profiles, the shear profiles for tornadic storms aren't perfect for hail trajectories.
Right.
Storms that produce big hail often don't like that really tight low level turning. They'd rather this big long turning arc through the mid levels. And if
Sense.
you look at a hodograph, to start to stretch it out. Whereas a tornado, we're looking for that tight, real quick turn right down low. And
Very
the
good
hail
clues.
producing supercells want a different environment. But the one exception that we do know are these what used to be called the tornado cyclone supercells. That's the El Reno
Yes.
2013 case. You could probably put Joplin in there.
Right.
Greensburg, Kansas.
Yes.
Those storms, these steady state absolute monster violent events are also producing behemoth hail. Like the El Reno supercell is flinging softball size hail in a wind driven rear flank downdraft
It's
that,
nightmare.
and nobody talked about it, right? Because we all know the, in the weather world, the events that transpired, but that storm produced behemoth hail that was wind driven too. So there's a lot of different things going on, some competing, and then some all together, sort of that Goldilocks effect.
So let's talk about, you said behemoth hail. That brings me to the question of, let's talk about different hail sizes. Do you all classify it? Is there a classification scheme? Or I know there's the penny and marble, and there's all kinds of ways, but so let's talk about it from the scientific perspective. Different types of hail. I think a lot of people think that it's kind of round and smooth, but boy, you look on social and it's all kinds of weird shapes and sizes and opacities and whatever.
Yeah, so hail is fascinating, and I love that people put
Agreed.
pictures of hailstones on social media.
I bet.
One thing we do know about hail, as it gets bigger, it actually becomes less spherical. It becomes more oblate. It gets more of those nice spikes and bumps and protuberances, if we want to call it that.
Good word. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we get down at the low end, the severe threshold is 1 inch. That's about when you start to hit some kind of damage threshold. And that's whether
One
that's
inch.
damage to vegetation.
Right.
A 1 inch hailstone won't, most cars won't, it won't dent it. We do know it can do some things to your asphalt shingle roofs if it's in high concentrations, but in
Sure.
general, 1 inch is where we start to see
Right.
something like some visible impacts from hail. Once we get to 1.5 inch, now we're starting to dent your car. Your car is left outside, 1.5 inch hail is gonna dent it. It's gonna cause vegetation damage for sure. It's gonna hurt if you're outside. I took a golf ball off the wrist one time during a field project. It did not feel very good.
Wow.
And while a new roof, even a new asphalt shingle roof, any can take 1.5 inch hail, an older roof, especially one that may be 10 years or older, won't. You're going to see visible damage. By the time you get to 2 inch, that's when we get to the significant severe. So we go from severe, significant, severe,
Okay.
and then we get to the big stuff.
Right.
Once you get upwards of the 4 inch hailstones, we call these giants. These are the giants. I'm not a big fan of the gorilla hail term. I don't.
Stolen chaser.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you go back, and I will give Matt Cumgen, Dr. Matt Cumgen at Penn State, a shout out. He coined the term gargantuan hail and actually got it in a paper, which I really like. And that
Oh,
one's
there you
once
go.
you're getting past the 6 inch mark, is
Right.
gargantuan hail. 4 inch hail can absolutely go through your roof deck. I can come right through this room, come down, land in my lap. It will go through your roof deck.
We'll get to that. Like this is just okay.
And once you're past that threshold, if you are caught outside in that, that is absolutely a threat to your life.
Right.
You get hit in the head by a stone that's moving that has that size at about 89, 90 miles an hour. It's no different than taking a fastball from a big league pitcher with no helmet on.
Pass.
And none of us want to do that.
Right.
And then by the time you get upwards of the record, the Vivian 8-inch hailstone, I can't personally, I've held the 3D model. I know what it looks like, but I can't even wrap my head around like running across one of those in the field and what that would be. But that's the spectrum of hail. And like I mentioned, as they get bigger, they get less spherical. They get these more just, I consider them very beautiful shapes, these spikes and bumps and they all look unique. And I think that's kind of
like snowflakes.
yeah, a little bit like snowflakes. And you cut them, you can see their layering structures, which is about what type of water and ice they collected. And they have their own art to them. And I wish you guys on watching this podcast can't see, but I have two actual canvases above my head that are hailstone cross sections. You can actually see a bit of one in the reflection in my glass back there if you're watching this podcast. And there's some beauty to that too.
I agree. And then you guys can start to see why, just for whatever reason, and again, I've been fascinated with it as a weather geek, but something happened last year, May or June, with CJ. CJ Morgan was with me. We had been out chasing, and I was trying to find our role out in Tornado Alley, the HurricaneTrack family. How can I take my passion for hurricanes and do something in Tornado Alley, and all that implies? And, there's all kinds of research. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of storm chasers. The tornado thing is getting way too crowded, in my opinion. Like, ugh. And there's also some toxicity with social media now. It's just, what are we going to do? And we've always had to avoid these hail cores because we were always in rental cars. And I was fascinated with it. And so there's that weird, like, I remember asking a couple of our colleagues that help out with crowdfunding and participating in person. I was like, what's your hail tolerance? And they like 1 inch or less. And now I know why. Matt, he knows who he is. And so we've always had to avoid these hail cores. You can generally see them if you're close enough. You can see them on radar scope and so forth. And so we were done, CJ and I, and sitting in a Texas Roadhouse, and he showed me one of those pictures. And somebody was holding just a big one. And I just thought, there has to be a way. I know there are research projects. I knew of IBHS, and I had a hunch that y'all were doing something. It wasn't like it's completely nobody's studying it. Well, that's not true. And I thought, I don't do anything with the hurricane stuff small. We've done incredible work with storm surge, and I thought there's got to be a way. And I told CJ, I said, we're going to figure it out. And of course, he was like, oh, help me. Like, here we go. And it was born. I was like, we're going to call it like the Hail Project or something real simple. And so now, almost a year later, this is being recorded on April 10th. It's about to happen. We've got a vehicle that's getting modified with basically a huge hail cage, or whatever you want to call it, hail guard. And we're going to mount experiments on top, lots and lots of these GoPros. I ordered more today just to really film it, appreciate it, study it, measure it, catalog it. And, Ian, we have even ordered a freezer that can be powered with a Jackery, and it's a 12-quart freezer, and we're going to get a shrink wrap thing. And so I've learned this stuff, like don't touch it, don't let it start melting, don't let it sublimate. And if we do get a big honker, whatever, I want to make sure we capture that, preserve it, and get it to the nearest WFO that we can. But we're also going to show people the adventure of it. What does it take to get into these hail cores and really shine a spotlight on it, more from the social media side? You all are doing the mitigation work. You've got, and we're going to get more into the science. Is it called a disperometer or something? What's that word?
Yes. Yeah. We've got our impact distrometers, which is just any sensor that's measuring a particle impacts and sizes. So
but you got like, is it a 7-figure plus budget, over $1 million? I mean, you know, if you don't want to disclose it, but I have
No, we're out
thousand
to
dollar
be
budget.
honest, I wish. I feel like the Northern Hail Project guys in Canada have that kind of money, but
Oh,
no, we're working off a field budget that's about 60K a year or so.
okay. But you've
Um,
got some
yeah.
PhDs and people that are really packed with years of this, and we're just getting started. And I thought, again, I really want to focus on let's build some awareness. I got to turn the iPhone off there. Let's build some awareness of what's happening in this world of hail, and we got to start somewhere. And then
Yeah,
part is going to be seeing you guys out there, and we'll get to your field project. But what were you going to say?
well, I was going to say, I think just getting folks to understand that this type of the hazard that comes with it is damaging, and it does a lot of damage every single year, is part of it. A lot of people, if you live in Dallas, you're going to run into a hailstorm at least once every 3-4 years or so. You know that, but somebody who's sitting maybe further, maybe in Middle Tennessee, who doesn't experience, or even out here in Maryland. I mean, it happens from time to time, but
Um,
when we want to talk about how much damage this hazard, this thing causes, being able to actually sort of sense what is the flavor of hail, what is the different, like I show folks a lot of times, I have a couple of different videos. One is a very high concentration event in Williston, that had just thousands of little, 3/4, 1 inch stones. Then I've got one from Eads, Colorado, which is just nothing but 1.5 and 2 inch stuff. One hits a GoPro, and you're like, there's all these flavors of this hazard. And I don't think people really quite grasp it. I
right,
do think hail
agree.
fascinates people. I will say that.
Right.
And I think we're starting to see that because the amount of social media pictures, and I tell you what, for the folks out there, we can do so much even with that. A good picture with some good reference objects, the machine vision technology, we can extract. We've even done some record investigations now just using that, working with the National Weather Service. So there's so much citizen science
Yeah.
out there that can be done. And Mark, you kind of take it and then run to the next level of that
Right.
stuff.
What
But
we
even
want to
just
do.
somebody who thinks they have a record, bag
Yes.
it up, put it in your freezer, take
Right.
some good pictures with even just something like this pen, a quarter, a ruler, take 3 or 4 of them, different angles. I tell you what, we can actually go analyze that, get the size out of it, get it to the weather service. And who knows, maybe you got yourself a state record.
Right. And that is exactly what I wanted to do. Then I wanted to take it a little further, get people excited and do some, there's a kid in here somewhere. There always is. And I told you about this. We want to test different percussive instruments. How does hail make music? Sounds bizarre, but it's amazing what it does. And I know that Matt, our friend, his name's Matt Clemens, he lives in Parker, Colorado, and he's going to be a guest on a separate podcast episode of the Hail Project podcast because he's got some stories to tell. Little hint, his insurance company canceled him because he had too many hail claims. He's he's a big friend of the project, but he's like, I hate hail, but I'm glad you're going to study it, I guess. Anyway, he was talking about how it impacts PVC pipes and pieces of fences. And I started thinking about what kind of noise that must make. And then I started thinking it's just one thing leads to another. Man, what if you had drums out there? I know nobody's not playing drums in a hailstorm, but what if you were? Or what if it was a big xylophone? What if it was a timpani? Or if you had the pipes right, it'd be like Blue Man Group. And I was like, these GoPros can record the audio. The audio in these $300 GoPros is amazing. And so we might as well study and observe our environment, our weather, especially when it turns against us, because we can really appreciate it better. And you said it best. I'll quote you on this. You said sort of the sensory element of hail. That's a big part of this as well.
Yeah, when you and I talked about this when we were together last, like that one, this one really, it sort of hit like everything else we talked about is like all in the brain and we're figuring
Right.
out the science part. And this one was like down in your gut. You're like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, this is something that, and we're starting to see more of this sort of translation of science to art. There's been
Right.
folks who've done this with lightning, but the sounds, the sensory aspect of what thunderstorms are doing
Mhm.
is just fascinating. And
Right.
this is something that only sort of humans can do when we think about like I've been thinking about space travel and all this
Right.
fun stuff with the eclipse lately, and
Of
tell
course.
my daughter like you're going to see us go back to the moon, and we've been talking
Right.
about that. This is how you wrap the entire experience
Right.
together,
Right.
and I find it just fascinating. So one, I I cannot wait
I know.
to see this come to life
It's
because it is going to be flat amazing.
time. Yeah.
And I am here as a little kid to see this come to pass, and I'm going to love it just like everybody else.
Well, I know too, as we talked at the conference, that you're into music as well. And actually, some of the scientists there were kind of an interesting connection there. We like art and music and severe weather and the randomness of it, and pretty cool. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And this will be a multi-year project, and we're just starting. Can't do it all at once. You know, it took 20 years to get from these huge cases and a bad video that you could barely see to 4K video of hurricanes making landfall at Cedar Key last year. That was incredible, you know, with Hurricane Idalia. That took 20 years. This will be a little bit closer because all the technology is already there, but we'll learn as we go. What else? I know I've got some user submitted questions, users, friends of the project, social media, as I start to think a little bit. So hail, yeah, density of hail is the damage. And let's talk about damage. That's a good, I had to get my mind back to focusing here. It seems maybe intuitive and maybe very logical. Well, why is the damage happening? Well, Mark, something very hard is hitting something and it's breaking it. But it can't be just that simple. You know, so it's kinetic energy. I was talking about this with somebody, I don't remember who, doesn't matter, but I'm like, this is really cool because it's actually kinetic energy and money, because that's what it comes down to. If it didn't cause damage, it would be like kinetic energy and it's just cool.
Yeah.
But there's a
Yeah.
financial aspect to this that's very problematic. Hydrometeorites and kinetic energy and finances.
Yeah, that's right. They all come together when we're talking
Right.
hail.
So how's the damage caused? I'll just pose a very simple question.
Yeah. So one thing way back when I first started, I was so naive. I'm like, it's just ice, right? Like it's like you pull out of your freezer.
Right.
No. I turned out it's just a basic literature search. And I was like, oh boy, okay. All right. So first, hailstones are not as dense as say an ice cube you'd pull out of your freezer, which is somewhere around
Not as dense.
9 grams per cubic centimeter.
Okay.
Hailstones are actually less dense, and they actually have they're a range as well. They can be fairly a lot of they can be very low density at times with a lot of trapped air. That's basically what it is. Or you can get up to some of those clear ice stones that are approaching sort of the density that you might get out of a freezer ice cube, something like that. But what we found when we first started this, we're like, okay, everybody used to say dense, hard.
Right.
All right, when you start looking at material properties, that's not necessarily the case. The strength of a material is not necessarily governed by its bulk density.
Right.
There's a lot of other things about how those ice crystals are sort of tied together and how the imperfections can lead to cracks, and cracks lead to less, say a crack in your axle in your car. It's going to break more readily, right?
Sure.
Something like that. Well, hail's no different. So we were trying to figure out, all right, how do we do a destructive strength test where you're crushing a hailstone to figure out how much force it takes to fracture it, and then also get a density. So back in the day, back in the 70s, and the last big hail research project that was a multi-agency one, they would dunk the stones in liquid mercury in a van in the field to do an immersion test to look at the displacement. And I'm like, well, I don't think OSHA's going to let us do that anymore. And we've got safety in our name. So I'm not even going to try to pitch that. So that's what we figured out, how to bring in laser scanning, the 3D laser scanning, to get a really precision volume of the stone. And then you go crush it so you can get that density. And what we found was that density and strength weren't 1-to-1. They were not. So bulk density does not relate to how strong the stone was.
Right.
Now, we have some hypotheses. We think it's more sort of the distribution of the ice types. We've been unable to prove it to this point. We just know they're unrelated at this point.
Right.
So a hard hailstone, when it hits your roof, so take a 2-inch hailstone that's very hard. One of those you might see on YouTube that bounces off the road or something like that. Sure. It's going to bounce off your roof, do the same thing. Those stones will dent and crack your shingle far more readily. Well, a soft stone does something different. It'll hit your roof and it's going to dislodge a whole bunch of those granules that are up there. It may not dent it, may not even crack it. So same kinetic energy for the most part, within a joule or two, but different modes of damage.
Right.
And the dents and cracks, that's your water intrusion problem, where you start to worry about water coming through your shingles and that kind of issues. Granules, that's much more a longer term problem. So asphalt, especially when it comes to your roof, does not like to be exposed to sunlight. That's why those granules and the coatings are on shingles. The shingle will get brittle if those come off. Well, hail's really good at knocking them off. So a soft hailstone is the best at doing that, and it
Wow.
just scrubs them off. So funny story. I used to hail, kind of the small hail in high concentrations can be like scrubbing bubbles, but it
Hmm.
does the same to your roof. Well, in graduate school, we weren't supposed to drive on dirt roads in field projects. Well, occasionally professor's not around. I'm gonna go do this. Well, I'd look for a storm on radar that I thought had a lot of high concentration of hail to wash the truck, to make sure nobody knew I drove on the dirt road. So John Schrader, if you're listening at Texas Tech, sorry, John, that's what I would do. I'd go run us through some small hail to clean the truck off so nobody knew I went on a dirt road and wasn't supposed to. But that it does that to your roof. So that's sort of the spectrum of hail that can come with its strength. And as we got into this, I just was like, oh, this is way more than I ever thought would be there. And it's just continued to today. And so we duplicate that. You got to see it when you came to the lab. We put this into how we test roofing and building materials. We test for both types, and we have different ways to evaluate that kind of damage to look at product performance.
So the damage that we're talking about, like last year, 60 billion, is most of that roof, or is it
It is. It
car,
is.
mostly roofs?
Yeah, and last year we did not have the signature windstorms that usually produce the
Right.
anomalously high losses. Like if you go back, with 2020 was another big loss year, was a record, was the big Midwest derecho. You got
Yeah.
to rewind all the way back to 2011 with
No.
super outbreak Joplin, and I realized the other day there was a southeast derecho event that year too.
Right.
Um, so usually, if the rule of thumb is about 90% of hail damage is roof related.
Okay. Well, how about
Um,
the auto industry? Like, was it really? I mean, I see when I go out to Dallas or whatever, they got those canopy things at
mhm.
dealerships, and I thought, well, part of that's got to be to help from sun, but are those hail canopies?
Yeah, a lot of it's hail canopies now. The big outdoor auto lots that are used as basically warehouses
Hmm.
really can take it on the chin. Now, when you look at that's a whole separate commercial insurance policy, and I actually wish I had the loss numbers for what that looks like. For auto itself, when you look at the bulk amount of property damage, it comes in somewhere between 8 to 13% of the total damage from hail
Okay.
each year. So it's not as much as I thought. The average auto claim, I think even this was from State Farm, is somewhere between $5 to $8,000.
Still,
Now, still a lot.
yeah.
You bump up to a roof, most roofs these days, you're over $10,000. Some are getting higher than that.
Mm,
We do know that we see reduced auto claims at night. Why? People have their cars in their garage.
right.
That's a good thing.
Sure.
Um, I remember looking at it and it just like, hey, it's there. It's certainly a meaningful piece, but it wasn't as high. I think some people, people think like, oh, it's got to be like half the hail losses. And it's somewhere between 8 to 13% of that, the whole pie that's hail damage every year.
So the B of IBHS is business. How much hail damage is occurring with businesses of all shapes and sizes? And what
Yeah.
about
So, yeah.
big, like distribution centers like Amazon or whatever? I mean, that's a whole, we do 2 hours just on that. I mean, my goodness. So yeah, the business side.
Yeah, so those are big flat roofs, and
Oh, yeah.
most of those are membrane or built up roofs. So the membrane is basically like a plastic cover with a cover
Okay.
board underneath it and the whole structural assembly beneath it. They can handle hail a bit better in terms of damage thresholds than, say, an asphalt shingle roof, but they do make damage, especially when they get older. Those materials start to become, it's a plastic material. It's been out in ultraviolet. It can become brittle and those crack. We've just started delving into how the severity of that damage changes, and the actual roofing assemblies make a big difference in the type of damage modes. And there's a whole slew of them. But yeah, they deal with it just as much.
Sure.
And you also, a lot of those businesses, if the event is severe enough you're going to let water in through the roof system, and now you've kicked in contents. And all those commercial entities have coverage that covers the interior contents as well as business interruption if
Right.
it got that bad.
Right.
And so that loss can also pile up on top of this. It just so happens across the board we have more homes than commercial structures in general that happen to be in the paths of these events. So that shakes itself out. But commercial buildings have to deal with this just the same.
So we have this will bring me to my first. This is from Will Woodgate. He's I call him a genius. He helped to build our interactive tracking map. He lives over in the UK. A great friend of the project. And one of the things he mentioned in this email to me, and I thought this was important to ask you about, he said, I think another very important avenue of research needs to focus on the weight of accumulated hail, especially in relation to roofs over buildings like stadiums, supermarkets, terminals, warehouses, and shopping malls. How about that? We see snow pile up and people start worrying about that. And I never thought
Yeah.
about that. Is too much hail. You talk about those flat roofs. Isn't it accumulating and the weight? Could that be a problem? Do you have collapsed roofs because of
So
hail?
I've never heard of one, but I do know our snow load code provisions across the country are pretty good. It's a dead load, it's a dead weight, it's easy to model from a structural
Right.
assembly perspective. I've never heard of one. Um, I would think hail does melt insanely fast.
Okay.
Um, and I would be more concerned about the water runoff problem on
Right.
an unmaintained commercial roof. That you now have an awful lot of water from melting hail that's up there. And any issues with your drainage system are going to be absolutely exacerbated. And I don't know enough about the commercial claims there, but
Okay.
that's what I would actually start to wonder if that's a problem when you get these big snowplow events.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good question. And then he talked about certainly community engagement. We addressed that. That's a great thing that there's more content out there, information coming in, and that's remarkable that you can look at pictures on social media and glean data from that. That's fantastic. How about internationally? Hail is not just a United States or North America problem. Let's talk about internationally briefly. Australia, Europe, they got a hail problem too, right?
Yep. So we'll start our friends to the north in
Yeah, yeah.
Canada. They are just a natural extension of Tornado Alley, and they
Sure.
get it just like we do. Calgary, home to billion-dollar hailstorms, just like Denver is.
Wow.
I do want to mention Europe is the place. Everybody, especially when I do a lot of media interviews these days, everyone's asking the climate change aspect.
Hmm.
And in the US, it's been very hard to tease out any climate fingerprints right now with hail. We see sort of a general migration northward in severe hail, maybe stretching out eastward. That sort of correlates a little bit with our tornado environment, but that's the hazard that we know the most about.
Sure.
But we also don't see the big hail environment or the big hail observations migrating much at all. But in Europe, they're seeing the most rapid increase in both frequency and severity of
Wow.
hailstorms, and it is absolutely they have observed this peril better than we have for a longer time, and it
Right.
really gives us confidence that this is the climate fingerprint that Europe is dealing with this. We talked about commercials, so there was I want to say it was the L'Oreal facility in France
Hmm.
that contributed to they took a massive wind driven hail event,
Oh yeah.
big glass commercial structure. It was a big factor in one of Europe's biggest. This was either last year or the year before in their record severe convective storm loss year. So, southern France, northern Italy, parts of Germany, parts of Austria, Switzerland, the topographic effects there play a role. But they are seeing a rapid uptick.
Wow.
And as hail, there's some speculation. We talked about this at the recent European hail workshop. If there's that latitudinal shift that
Right.
we see sort of in the US, you're going to put a heck of a lot of big cities like Frankfurt, Germany. You start to think about Paris
Hmm.
into the bullseye of big hail.
I mean, the Olympics
Um,
are coming. That's summer. Is their hail season kind of like ours?
It is. It's very similar. It's a spring hail season. It extends typically a little bit later, and
Ooh,
they get hail out of not just supercells, but even some multi-cell linear convection
right.
in Europe seems to produce more hail than maybe
Wow.
we think here. And then you mentioned Australia. Absolutely, they deal with this as well, and some of the best damage research. Because of their access to insurance data and damage data has actually come from the Australian community. So yeah, big shout out to Dr. Joshua Soderholm from down there. Josh actually has pioneered some the hail sonde, which you can actually think of it drop sonde, but it's a hailstone, as well as some more cell phone based 3D scanning of hailstones, which is really amazing work. So
Yes.
they get it just like we do, and has turned up the amplifier on trying to get some more research done to deal with their hail problem down there.
In Brazil and the UK, finally. I mean, UK, obviously, a little bit different climate
Yeah.
up there. Still, I mean,
And I failed to mention Argentina in
yes.
that area just east of the Andes that gets some of the biggest like MCS HP
Right.
supercells that we think in the world. The Relampago project a few years ago, we thought there was a hailstone a couple of this was right either during Relampago or before that was bigger than the Vivian South Dakota stone. It looked
Wow.
like it from video, but
Right.
nobody had saved it, and so we're just trying to work off of pictures. And so they get massive hail events there. It's just the population centers aren't near as big. The
Right.
bullseyes aren't as big.
Sure. Um, let's see. Getting a good clean hail sample. This is from Devin. He says, you know how a basketball net is shaped. Think of that, but tighter, something to take away the kinetic energy. We got smart people using kinetic energy. I like that. Of the hail to prevent it from smashing, because you want to keep it preserved against something and, keeping it preserved. And, I've been thinking about that. I want to collect as much hail as I can to document it, to catalog it, and so forth. And my idea was initially to put a big igloo cooler or something up on the top of our vehicle without the lid, of course. We're going to put these quick dam things in the bottom. They're like squishy once you activate them. I need to send you some, by the way. I'm going to get the company to send you some. They could come in very handy for all kinds of stuff. Um, but we want to preserve it. But like, what are some ways that scientists are collecting hail so that you can keep it in its virgin quality, if it's even possible?
Yeah, back in the National Hail Research Experiment in the 70s, that is exactly what they did. They took a netting
Oh,
just like a basketball net, and they had a hole cut in a van and drove into the hills. I mean, it's more, I start to think like we're all
there's
just
got
working
to
off
be
of
video of
variants of
that.
people who've had ideas, and
Right.
we've got great technology to go do more of this. But that was their idea, and it
That's
worked.
awesome.
And Julian Bremlow at in the Northern Hail Project doing something similar, but a stationary collector with the same idea, and is to use a sort of a tight but soft netting. And
Yeah.
we even tested this at the lab. We were impacting stones off of field turf samples, and
Right.
field turf, the good rubber fake grass, is pretty good at catching hailstones and being pretty
Okay.
soft. So that's an option. He was going to couple that with a net, so even if they hit the bottom,
Right.
they'd survive. And one of the big reasons is, IBHS, our program, we try to stay out of the hail and we try to get in there as fast as we can, but we know melting happens.
Right.
And some of the really unique shapes, it is important to capture them in their pristine state, rather than, some of the lobes get rounded off because of melting, and you get a little more oblateness just from melting. So it's very important when we can to be able to get there and get those stones. So you can do sort of the van way,
Yeah.
in situ get it. You
Hmm.
could deploy the cooler and stick some dry ice in there or something like
Right.
that to keep them. We know that works really well for preserving them.
Right.
And then lastly, try to I always tell everybody, be careful handling. They do melt.
Yeah. Yeah, you were
Shockingly.
telling me about that.
Yeah, they do melt.
Yeah, we're gonna
Um,
get some
and
stuff.
handle them with rubber gloves, stick them in a
Right.
Ziploc bag, try to get the air out or shrink wrap it, whatever. But yeah, so it's just building on some of these ideas that folks have had over the years. And
I
yeah,
think
there's all sorts of ways.
high frame rate, and we'll have to see. I don't know. I mean, the light, how many people are trying to capture hail shapes and whatever with GoPros. Not many, I wouldn't think. And we're gonna have so many of them out there, and we have to figure out different backgrounds. I mean, this is what I mean. We got to figure it out because it's not. I can't go and see what so and so's been doing, and maybe basically photogrammetry, if you will, that you capture it. And I'm thinking these will shoot at 240 frames per second, and that's cool for your slow-mo shots. We did a little sample there at IBHS. That was so cool. But forget the impact for a second. What about just catching it? And I get excited. You know how I get with this, folks. I could just see me the night of, we finish up, it's over, we get back to the hotel, and I get that chip out and I put it in and I open up After Effects on a nice Mac computer or something, and I'm going through frame by frame at 240 frames a second to find that perfect one where it's in focus and we captured it and it's in 4K and I could take a screenshot, send it to Ian. Look what
like that technology has opened that door. And I need to highlight some really neat work that Sean was doing at the Severe Storms Lab. Sean's got a high-speed camera with big, he's going to mount it in a truck and he's got the big lights to go with it. But as technology, as technology gets better, if we can add more capability to do this, and you're just going to get more data, and more data means we can start slicing and dicing it up into so many different ways. And it's how you get these composite pictures of making sense of what about that environment did what to the hailstone.
Right.
And we also with this get to see the stones. How do they tumble?
Sure.
We flew some 3D prints in an iFly skydiving wind tunnel and saw some crazy things. Does it happen in real life? I don't know. We had stones spinning like helicopter rotors. Does that happen?
Like, wow. That's hard to believe. You think they just fall, but the fact that they could start, you actually said they could slow down a little bit. They sort of create their own downdraft.
And that's something that just scientifically, even just from pure curiosity, we have never been able to see. Like we haven't had the ability to see what the stones really do look like when they're falling. And then you can start to infer, like, what in the world do they look like when they're in the updraft? Like, how does that look?
We're even going to try that. I told you, when I launch a tiny little payload, we call it the one we have for hurricanes, Herbie, hurricane balloon. But, even just one GoPro right at that supercell, who knows? It may not work. It might work.
Do you start picking up ice on it if you can get it into the updraft? Like, what's going to happen? Or could you see the last sort of visual observations we had of that were back when we had the T-28 armored aircraft and we were actually actively flying into hail producing thunderstorms. And that was before we had this kind of camera technology. And for those who don't know, the pilot of that aircraft, his name is Wayne Sands. Wayne is an American treasure. He is a former Vietnam fighter pilot. And he also is a professor at, I believe, North Dakota or South Dakota Mines and Technology. I could be missing the state. And Wayne, I apologize. But Wayne flew fighter jets. And then decided to fly the armored aircraft for NCAR and fly them into hailstorms. And he gave a presentation a couple years ago that just blew my socks off. And Wayne, we love you. You are an American treasure for sure. And Wayne is the last person to actually really get that look, to be able to experience what that's going on in a thunderstorm.
Let's take a brief break, and we'll be back afterwards with Dr. Ian Giammanco talking hail. All right, and we are back talking hail now with Dr. Ian Giammanco. What a conversation it has been so far. It's just amazing stuff. Where should we go next with this? We were talking about maybe photographing it using GoPros, and I don't know. Let's talk about your field project that's coming up in that I can't say it. What's that word?
Yeah, so we've got our hail disdrometers, or impact probe, or impact sensor, if you want to go with that. But yeah, our field study's coming up. We do an annual field project each year that sort of has different goals as kind of our work progresses. Early on, we've talked about hail strength, and one of the early goals of the project was to do that work, is to collect a bunch of hailstones, do all this strength testing. But we've kind of moved on to assessing the swaths of hail themselves using instruments that can get us that time history of what impacts look like. So how much of what size how fast, how fast was it accumulating? What part of the storm was the biggest hail in? Where was the highest concentrations? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're going to take it a little bit further. We're going to, you and I talked about this. We're going to actually put out some roofing material panels. There's some damage modes we've seen in the lab with different materials that we want to see. Does that happen in actual thunderstorms?
Right.
We think we have a good test, but the one thing that I've learned over these years, if you have a test, don't let it be stagnant.
Right.
That's what got us into some problems in the built environment in the first place, with letting tests sit for 30, 40 years
Oh,
with
okay.
no
Yeah.
updated science.
Makes sense. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to take some roof panels out and also co-locate them with these impact sensors to be able to get a very complete picture of what they saw, as well as cameras, just like we were talking about,
Right.
to be able to see what these modes of damage, like actually watch that happen
Right.
on a roof. So that's the
Glad
goal of
to hear
this
that.
year.
I was
Um,
wondering about that. I saw it in the lab and they were coming horizontal. And I remember I was telling my wife about this. I'm like, man, they do all that in the lab. It's pretty controlled. And, nature is pretty random.
yep.
Surely they're going to take some of those things out there. I thought I could envision, like, if, I don't know, a billionaire somewhere wrote me a big old check, or you guys or whatever, get a big old flatbed and then have a hail-proof cab and just load those things up from IBHS and take them to the hail.
Yeah,
You
we
can
even
do
thought
that in
about
some.
using a trailer and doing that exact same thing and just park it, and it's like its own little instrument roof system, or even use sort of doghouse kind of.
Right.
I mean, you got to see a roof aging farm there, a specimen that's that size of a 15-foot by 15-foot type structure.
Like
It's a lot
miniature
of options.
area things, like you have a little picnic under there.
Hmm.
Gnome.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the wind driven part. We have an experimental sensor that was a research and development project for a couple of our young scientists who have done a great job to try to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
We do not have, believe it or not, there is not a testing standard for wall materials for hail. We don't know enough about the impact angles and how much added kinetic energy. Thunderstorm winds are very complicated. The vertical profile is really complex. Obviously, everybody can feel how the gustiness changes. It's different from a hurricane. And we don't have a good handle on what we should test wall materials to. So that's
You
going to
say
be
wall
part
material.
of this.
Jump in. What do you mean by wall material?
Yeah, so think about vinyl siding, wall or wall cover. So
Right.
brick veneer. A lot of people think, oh, hail can't puncture or crack brick veneer. Well, okay, I mean, probably not. But think about the vinyl siding damage we
Yeah.
see each year. That's part of it. We know with the emergence, concrete fiberboard sidings growing very, very quickly. Stucco can be damaged by hail impacts, and we have no test standard for wall materials. And that can also play in windows as well, as we start to look at impact resistant windows for
Wow.
severe storms regions.
So no testing or no standards for it. So I mean, is there a way to know then that $60 billion? Can you parse it out? How much of that is from wind driven? Because I remember in the last couple of years, there's been so much weather these last few years.
Yeah.
There was somewhere along the I-35 corridor, I thought, wasn't it near Tulsa or somewhere? There was a wind driven one. I remember people talking about it on
Yeah.
Twitter, and it was frightening. Like, I'm like, that's a hard pass for me. They were like, it is literally just blasting the house.
Minneapolis was home to one of the most prolific wind-driven hail events. I don't even think this was one where you had just immense thunderstorm outflow driving 1 inch hail. I don't even think there was a single 1.5 inch hail report, and it was $1 billion loss event because it was just shredding siding. And while these aren't the common hail events, they
Right.
do happen. And there are also ones that are very impactful at hail sizes that we would not normally
Right.
think are that damaging. So that's a part of this sort of, we need to understand what do
Right.
we need to test to?
Yeah.
And that part of hail research, there's so little information. All we've really had to go on is some of the old school hailpad citizen science reports, where the observer could make an observation estimating impact angles. Well, there's enough technology now. We felt we could go figure out a sensor to measure it, and there's a commercial system that sort of does the same as well. But That's going to be a big part of this year's project too, is to take
Great.
that prototype instrument out and give it a whirl and see if it will do what we think it will do.
Well, I'm hoping, and we're going to be in touch as your stuff starts. It's May 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
That's correct.
June 2nd.
Yeah, so May 18th through about June 2nd or 3rd, we'll leave the back end a little flexible.
Right.
Just we'll let the weather dictate things,
Right.
but it's about 2 weeks. We
Right.
get that's our typical field. We get about 14 days total in the field each year from the budget we've got.
14 days to do that work. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to be near you, watching, and we'll do our thing. And also want to make sure, as part of exposing the public to this, as your schedule allows, get you in with Fox Weather, do some interviews with you. I really want the world to know what you guys are doing. This is a collaborative thing. It's not just about, oh, I want to be the hail expert. I'd love the cross-pollination, and that's worked in my business. You know, you look at people like Max Olson, who has put cameras out and he captured the Fort Myers Beach event. You know, would I have loved to have been that guy? Well, yeah, but he did, and he learned, some stuff from us over the years, and that's great. And so, collaborating and working together and just seeing you guys do what you do after I saw you that brief few hours at the lab, in South Carolina, and then to see you do it out maybe in Nebraska or who knows where, that's going to be amazing. And who knows what we're going to figure out while we're out there. Sometimes these things happen, while you're there. These ideas come to light. I
I
can't.
always joke, it's not a joke, but the best work in field projects always goes on in hotel parking lots,
Right.
where you either have some new idea, you're fixing instruments, you're
Something.
making a change to make something work better.
Hmm.
And it is amazing. And I've loved being a part of this Hail community, and for all sorts of reasons. We just very, very cordial, and everybody has always wanted to work together. And
Right.
that's what I've loved about it. And yeah, and maybe we can be in the same spot and have a Holiday Inn Express breakfast and have a
Yes.
cinnamon roll. I remember running into Tim Marshall one year, and I've got a picture somewhere. Tim and I sitting in a Holiday Inn Express, and I think Childress, Texas. It was either that or
Oh, yeah.
Hampton.
Oh,
Um,
yes. There is a Hampton Inn in Childress. I stayed there last year.
yeah,
That
so
I
we,
remember that
yeah,
as
I've
scary.
got all those stuck in my head. My wife used to joke she could remember like what stuff was at like each
Right.
exit
Yeah.
along like I-70 in
Yeah.
Kansas, and it you start to realize, and I've loved this
Right.
time, even from back when I was a student, getting to see this part of the middle of the country in towns you wouldn't normally go to.
Agree.
Um, Everybody who chases has that same. There's something about that part of the world that does something to you, and I still don't know what it is,
Agree.
but you just sit there and it becomes part of you, and then you start missing it.
Right.
And I think of hurricanes a little bit of the same way. Just um, it just sticks with you for whatever reason.
I call it the Hurricane Highway, and it's literally a podcast and a web series, a little documentary series, and that's exactly what it is. And there's off ramps, and
Yeah,
there are the people you meet along that Hurricane Highway, and the desert Southwest is the same way for the monsoon. And when we get
yeah,
tropical cyclones coming up there, it's just so special. Real quick before I forget, back to you talking about wind-driven hail. I was thinking we're in some town somewhere, and there's one of those hail cores coming. Is there it's a two-part question. Is there a way to know in quotes, right? This one could be a wind-driven event in the next few minutes. Holy crap. And then B, well, let's one thing at a time, Mark.
yeah,
Let
yeah.
answer the first part, and then we'll get to the second
So
part.
that is a that answer, should we be able to eventually find it, is a $1 million kind of question.
Okay.
Um, right now we don't know.
That's a
Um,
meteorological
yeah,
thing.
meteorological, like thunderstorm outflows and how they sort of pulse and don't, and we don't know much about that.
Interesting.
We understand, what's producing them, obviously,
Right.
buoyancy driven and vertical pressure gradient force, things like that. But being able to forecast that is
Right.
pretty hard. We do know HPs and high precipitation supercells are often producing fairly steady, strong outflow. So there's a good probability some hail is going to get caught in that.
Okay.
We don't know a lot about hail production in mesoscale convective complexes. And even like the ones we saw today, there was a bunch of 1 inch hail across the Mobile
Yep.
in
Oh,
Baldwin County,
yeah,
Alabama.
I saw that.
Um,
Poor
we don't
Jason didn't
observe
get down
those
there.
very well at all. So who
Right.
knows what in the world's going on? We know those things are making big outflows, they're producing wind. This
Interesting.
one made some hail. We don't know a lot about that. And as technology gets us to the place, and Europe's experimented with this, these active, there's some places in Europe that have gone to window shutter systems, sort of like we do with hurricanes, right? The automated shutter systems,
Yeah.
but these are done in minutes time scales
Right.
for hail. Well, what if we got so good at sort of the worn on forecast element for hail, we can start putting in some of these active mitigation
That's
pieces.
a really $1 billion.
Yeah,
That's
that's $1 billion question and answer
whew,
right there.
billionaire. You come up with that, folks. Well, I was wondering the second part if we could know as best we could that this one could have some wind driven and we're some in a town somewhere, wherever. Um, the way we've got our GoPros, these little clamp things, I showed you that when I was down there, we can put them on anything, and it would just be incredible, again, to just get one of these on the side of a house, and either way, they're
Yeah,
vertical, and see it, and
yeah,
maybe get one on a tree, or something looking back at it. So you have the down the side, and then so that'd be like a profile shot, and then straight on, whatever you call that, and yeah, a perpendicular shot. I mean, and again, just using video as a starting point and at least see it. And so that's going to be the trick. We're going to have all this equipment ready and then look at each individual situation, whatever the day is bringing us, and look for
yeah.
opportunities to capture something that needs to be captured. And
Yeah,
then
we've had this same sort of concept too, and it's setting up our impact sensors in a suburban environment, and
right,
we've mapped out I think 20 or so different already predetermined grids.
right,
And some
nice,
of that's this exact same thing is one, being able to capture that kind of data inside a neighborhood and then being able to do a damage assessment afterwards.
sure,
But you're also putting fixed image. That's the one thing that is missing, I think, Mark, is we see people take cell phone videos all the time of
right,
hailstorms, but none are done in a sort of fixed systematic way that you can see the features that you
right,
want to look at. You will need to see the building material, sort of what's the wall, or if you're sort of a roof system, what's the roof
right.
cover, what's the pitch, the slope,
Something
and the
else
hail
up
coming
there
at it as
on the
well.
roof.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
Gotta
So
hurry. We're gonna have to do so much to get
yeah,
stuff.
and this is, the
House
old school
loaded
Florida
up.
coastal monitoring program did this with hurricanes too when they were
Sure.
instrumenting homes, and it was labor intensive. But
Right.
everything these days is
Right.
smaller, lighter, easy to deal with than it was 20, 30 years ago. And I mean, all full well in the hurricane environment.
Man, I mean, and you talk about the video, I mean, a lot of it is shot vertical, and I hate that. But you're right. And I think about the value of what we've done, and it was just kind of by accident from the hurricane stuff. This is the one that was in Michael, by the way. That's the exact box that was on the pole. Um, and just the fact that I can't be there, so we got to mount this box up here. That started 20 years ago, and we get all the way through Michael and Ian and Adalia and whatnot. But it becomes important because you can see from a fixed position in pretty high resolution video now, all the way up to 4K, the whole event. And I think about like what we captured in Ida in Frenier Landing, to see that entire event unfold all the way up to where the storm surge got to right here and even went over the camera, that we ran into at the National Tropical Weather Conference. This guy, Leonard. So you have French. What is Italian or French? Your last
Yeah,
name?
so I have an Italian
Oh, thanks.
background. I will say though, I do have some Cajun French in me. My grandmother's maiden name was Dufresne, so
So this is
I've
Leonard.
got like the best of in my genetics, the best of all the food world. So I've got
Oh,
Italian, South Louisiana, Cajun Creole. Yeah, we just do it all on my side.
well, this guy is Leonard Bousseau, Boussioux. And he's Sloan School of Management up at Cambridge. at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He was talking about AI, and he came up to me and he said, your videos, talking about for near landing especially, he thinks, and I've been wondering this for the last few years, that there might be an opportunity to get wind speed out of this video using AI. And I thought, yeah, there has to be a way that's not completely where you have to load it up with targets and multiple cameras, that it should just eventually get there that you can have fixed camera video of hail, tornadoes, and hurricanes, and you can pull out all of that data that is in those pixels. It's there. And it could go all the way back to some of our earliest work if the AI gets there. That would be amazing. Then you could put up all kinds of cameras that could record stuff, throw it through the AI. You can get impact information. I just think we're at the beginning of it.
Yes, absolutely. I think machine vision will make the particle tracking part
I knew you would.
Of all that photogrammetric work. And you think about even how we remaster movies. You think about all the even the old school recorded analog tape videos that can be remastered into today's high def. The one thing people don't realize, like analog, it's the full res is in there.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get it out.
Right.
But I think it's going to take us there. And I've long even thought, way back when I first started at IBHS, we had talked about how do you make a smart roof that can detect hail? I don't think you need to. You just need the camera systems and the machine vision piece to pick them up. And we've got doorbell cameras, all that stuff. People, that's everywhere now. It's just how precise can you get? And I think about just what we've done. Some of our folks at IBHS doing, hailstone pictures analysis. Like we looked at the recent Ada, Oklahoma possible state record and compared it to the old the Gotebo one. And I think we're doing more precision measurement out of machine vision than you can do with rulers. And I'm even starting to wonder calipers, because you're still having to human eye assess that right plane that's the maximum dimension. Well, the machine vision part can take care of that. You can slice and dice it just like we slice and dice our 3D laser scan volumes.
While we're thinking about that, and I don't want this to be informational, but now it's going to become just briefly sort of technical for my work that's coming up. So, I've got a piece of foam here and it's gray, and I have my mouse pad, which is black. So we get a nice hailstone, and I want to photograph it with my high resolution iPhone. We're sitting with a studio, that's not quite IMAX. That's a little bit of hyperbole, but we got everything we want right here. You don't need a DSLR or whatever, but what's a good background? How can we help? And how?
So you're dead on. It's a high contrast background against a hailstone. And then for machine vision, what makes it real easy is some type of known reference object, whether that's a coin. The ruler is still perfectly fine, and then do sort of oblique angles of the same hailstone sitting as its thing, do a couple of different angles around with those same reference objects. And if you go all the way around, there's even thought we can stitch a full 3D model together.
Matrix.
Yeah. Yes. That's all it is. But 2 or 3 pictures. So this Ada, Oklahoma stone, one of the references was the Toyota logo on the back of the guy's 4Runner that he found it.
Perfect.
So what did we do? I went out. My wife has a 4Runner. Our managing director of research at IBHS also has a Toyota. So we were measuring the dimensions of the Toyota logo. Yeah. And that was enough as one extra point of reference to go with his one ruler. There was a more flat plan view picture. Plan view, couple of oblique shots. Right. And now you got it. And it's those known reference objects that have just changed the game.
That's right. Absolutely. I hope the group is taking notes here. We'll have a box of reference materials, and we should throw one in there that'll just be funny. Like, I don't know, just think of something like a Rubik's Cube, whatever.
Yeah, and in this case, I was talking to Rick Smith about this at the Norman WFO about this record, and there's a difference of about 1/10 of an inch between this latest hailstone and the original Oklahoma record. Rick, we did some confidence tests. I think this technique is precise enough to go to a tenth of an inch. Now, whether you guys in the records committee with the state climate office want to do that,
Right.
but I'm telling you, the technology and the science part is going to give you that. And that's what the citizen science part of this is just could be so much fun. I mean, we went and did a record investigation in Salado, Texas, and it was a wonderful lady and her family. She's one of the school principals in Salado, and she was just enamored about it. And I wish I'd have been on that trip. And then we had the actual Texas state record in Hondo, and another family had this wonderful lady had her grandkids. And I see this kid's face in the pictures. I'm like, oh my goodness, what if he becomes the next
Yeah.
me or
Yeah.
meteorologist? I mean, just
Yeah.
anybody in this field is like, oh my goodness, that's just so cool. And
It is.
he was so enamored by it, like just that little bit of, and I think Hale is the place right now where anybody just doing some of this can, you get to contribute to some really neat, and
This
I'll tell you, it's cutting edge stuff. It's
is.
an area of work that hasn't
Wow.
been looked at in a while.
Boy.
And
See, I was on to something when I told CJ,
yeah,
hey, we're going to do something with hail. Like, it wasn't that crazy of an idea, CJ. All right.
I'm just assimilating everybody. That's what I use, is just assimilating everyone into the Hale universe, and resistance is futile.
Perfect. Karen, one of our friends down in Florida, the Groveland area, she holds the record for the longest appearance on Fox Weather of our whole group, including me, and I work with them. And because she was impacted by hail, I guess last year, again the
Oh
year,
yeah. Yeah.
and she had 7 minutes. That's an eternity on
Oh,
network
oh
TV.
my goodness, yes it is.
She was on there with Ian Oliver talking about her hail experience. She actually filmed it, and it was in Groveland. Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. I see the cat's paw coming under the door. That is so funny. Um, anyway, animals. So you look over and there's a paw, a leg coming under the door. The cat's trying to get in. Karen had a big hailstorm that hit the Groveland area a couple years ago, whatever it was now, and it destroyed her tomatoes, her plants, and other damage to her property. And she filmed it, and it looked like it was a golf ball. I should ask her to send me that again, or if I can find it, I'll forward it to you. And who knows, maybe you can make something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. We took a whack one year at trying to estimate kinetic energy from pool splashes
Yes, and
by
we're gonna.
hailstones. Just
That's
you
something we
can.
want to. Yes. Ian, this is great. But so Karen asked me to ask you. Um, so she had. I didn't know how to pronounce this. It was Tulle. She said it's pronounced tool. It's like a net, but it's very fine.
Hmm.
So she said I had tool over a good portion of my plants. It is stretchy. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like pantyhose, maybe, is what I'm picturing. What I noticed was pencil-sized holes all over the tool,
Oh,
as if everything had been shot by bullets. So I've upgraded to a stronger fabric. But does or would that make a difference in the long run? Like if it was a better fabric? Seriously, Cat. Um, is that these even small hailstones moving so hard and fast, like a bullet, that basically nothing's going to stop it? Because she wants to
so
protect those tomatoes. So,
yeah,
and
it's
a lot of things in the
possible.
gardening world. So, how do they protect against hail?
So it's that same method. The vineyards in Europe are dealing with this exact same problem as we speak, and they do go to a mesh netting. Um, I could not tell you the material. Think about a typical 1 inch hailstone. You're moving at 40, 50 miles an hour. That's not
Right.
terribly fast.
Huh.
Now, the question is the things we do know that usually the impact sort of marks that hail make is typically, it is generally smaller than the actual size of the stone. So, um, but in Europe, they do that. And I have no idea what, the translucent material that they're going to use for netting. Uh, Trampoline, that mesh, that kind of polyester, I guess it's not really polyester, but
Right.
it's polyvinyl mesh. I have never seen a hailstone go through it, and trampolines are about the best. They're actually a really good collector of hailstones. They're also collect wildfire embers quite well too.
So, trampoline
Um,
like the hailstones.
yes, yes. We had a hailstone in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when I was still living there, and I had my neighbor's son who was he was 7 at the time, and he's out there running around on his trampoline collecting hailstones for me. And we took some fantastic pictures of it because they all just bounced and sat there.
Really? So
So that material does pretty well.
they collect them, because I was thinking about putting, like, I can't bring a giant trampoline with me, but I was thinking about getting one of those exercise trampolines and putting it on top of our hail
Yeah,
guard.
you could do that if you sort of damp the springs a little bit, which I think
Yeah,
you probably could figure out how to do. That material works really well. And I've never seen a stone go through it, but now I'm really curious as to what kind of mesh a hailstone would actually puncture. And I don't know what those vehicle canopies are made of and what their damage threshold is. Um,
hey, we should,
but I have no idea.
the years, we should test some of that stuff. Again, that's going to be a really neat part of our project, is to just put stuff up there, bring it with me in the bed of the truck, and set it out and see what happens in the real world, like what you're going to be doing with those roof sections.
Yeah. I
Um,
have something I've been wanting to do at our lab is to get into the agricultural losses because
right.
it
That's
gets
right.
into my gardening hobby just like we're talking about
Yeah,
here, but get to make large plots that we can do on raised beds and just roll them into the test chamber
sure.
and go run a full scale
Right.
hailstorm over these crops. Well, ag loss is a big deal,
Yeah.
and it's much more sensitive to the type of hail and the stage of crop growth too.
Right.
So, and then you start talking about these mitigation measures.
Mhm.
Um, it's only the vineyards in Europe is the one that really comes to mind because I know they've been dealing with this problem. Um, but that's one of my kind of wild ideas is to be able to sort of make a mobile farm out in the
Yeah.
back of our facility and wheel it into the big chamber and um, do a
Yeah.
simulation. University of Nebraska does some great work on this,
Right.
and they
That's
have
what
a
I was
mobile
thinking.
hail cannon that they
Yeah.
drive around on a tractor and do this. But um, yeah, it gets your mind going. Like, hey, where can we
Right.
go with putting a hobby with science and
Right.
uh,
Well, Karen's connection to the gardening world is pretty substantial, and I know her. She's going to get so fired up about this. More citizen input. I know she's going to rally that crowd. This is just fantastic. I mean, because it is. It's homes and businesses, and then we talk about the ag side. And I was thinking about, and I've been out to that part of the Midwest where you see all those wind farms and the solar arrays that are out there, and they're popping up elsewhere, even east of the Mississippi. So how about that? Does a big hail core just decimate a wind farm, or are they built to withstand that? I mean, again, that's
so
the
that's
business part of IBHS, although it's a different industry.
yeah, different industry. But so on the wind farm, I don't know. Wind turbines, those blades are generally a fiberglass kind of composite. So they
Right.
probably are susceptible. A big enough hailstone might cause some delamination. Any
Eli-
of those composite type materials will delaminate. And folks out there are going to love this one. Aircraft composite fuselages. The test standard that governs debris impact is actually hailstones traveling near the speed of sound. Those fuselages, those carbon composite fuselages, have to be able to withstand that without delaminating.
Sure.
So aluminum won't do that,
Right.
but a carbon composite that's basically laminated sheets of
Right.
material will delaminate on impact. So who knows with wind turbines? I know the lightning's a big issue. Lightning will just puncture
Sure. And the
the
tornadoes
fiberglass.
I think in Twisters, we're going to get to see flying
Uh,
blades apparently from the trailer. But are you excited about Twisters coming
So,
out?
so I am. I am
Of
a
course.
little older that I was not in the generation that was inspired by the first one. But like all meteorologists, I do like it. And when I was teaching in grad school, on the last day of class, I'd show the original Twister, and I had made a scoreboard of what was right, what was wrong.
Right.
Um, and it's still a movie, right? It's meant for
Of
entertainment. But
course.
then I saw the cast of this new one. I'm like, ooh, whoa, that's a bang up cast.
Yes.
And then I watched the trailer, and I'm like, oh boy, this looks pretty cool. I
Yeah.
don't know how they're going to do the plot.
Right.
We'll see.
They
But
were trailer in front of Dune 2 here in
cool.
IMAX. And so I saw it on an IMAX screen, and I thought, wow, the CGI and
Yeah.
whatnot, it looks pretty good. And then I saw that one
Yeah.
blade come boom. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
now we're getting into the wind farm destruction, but also solar farms.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
Yeah,
get back to that.
whole solar farm was just like, it was like an aerial shot. And I mean, it just looked like it was just destroyed by a hail core.
So, with the emergence of these big solar farms, hail's become a big deal, and the insurance that goes with those big
Right.
facilities. The one positive that those systems have going for them, they do have a testing standard. It's a 2-inch ice ball, pure ice ball impact,
Okay.
at a kinetic energy that's equivalent to about a 2.25-inch natural hailstone. So there is a test standard for that glass.
Right.
What happens though, and we've tested a little bit of this, did a couple of pilots in our lab. When you push the test just 1 or 2 joules over the standard, the glass fails. And then any subsequent impact will start making impact marks on that laminated glass. It's also why you may see a panel that is untouched or what looks untouched in a field or an array of where everything just looks obliterated. It's because it didn't catch an impact that
Sure.
met that kinetic energy
Wow.
threshold. And there's some questions in the industry about how consistent is that test. My wife's been working a little bit of just trying to understand what are the industry's concerns. We built our test to make a more consistent ice that was representative hail,
Right.
a natural an ice ball you'd pull out of a mold. It's got its expansion cracks. Its strength is not uniform. The industry was worried that the test itself doesn't have enough consistency for what they're doing.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they're trying to even value engineer it further, but
Right.
that's sort of the state of solar. So it's a problem because think where our best solar resource is going to be in the places that see thunderstorms and hail, just like the
Right.
wind turbine problem too. And we're gonna have to figure out how to design better for this.
Apparently, we got to figure out how to design better for everything with everything that's getting thrown at us from Mother Nature. Anything we didn't cover that you thought or think that, oh, let's talk about this as we get
So
towards
this
the
was a wonderful dive into the world of hail. It's been a
great
lot of
introduction
fun.
project. Yeah.
Um, I it's so funny because you and I kind of sort of come from the same general hurricanes over to hail.
Right.
Whether hail's the dark side or not, I don't know yet. But I think I just love the fact that people are interested in hail
I want to
again,
get them more
after all this time.
part of the goal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing before I wrap this up, and you've been out in enough of these more than I have, anything that you'd recommend for me to be careful of? I mean, other than the obvious, don't get out lightning, don't let hail hit you, but like, what are some hazards that I might not have thought of? Because I am a little
So
worried about playing around with hail cores.
yep, this is, we try our best not to get caught in them. But if that's the target, you're fine. We know you can build a hail guard and it will
Yeah,
do the trick for sure.
I'm hoping.
The thing in the field that always has scared me is lightning.
Oh,
Everybody
absolutely.
knows it.
I get
Um,
nightmares about it
yeah,
recurring.
our teams, we carry AEDs in all our vehicles. We're all CPR trained and all that stuff. And I would encourage anybody who's going out to the field to do that. Um, but I've also noticed
Put it on the Amazon.
and this too now, and I think it's crept into the hurricane space. The chaser traffic has gotten
Whew,
it's a
yeah,
different level these days than even when our hail project started. And the one lucky thing though is hail. I'm not after the best view of a tornado in an HP or something like that. We're usually there deploying instrument before anybody else shows up. And for you, it's going to be sort of the same. Like positioning for hail is very different.
sure.
And you're going to find you won't have to deal with it as much, but it can. I remember I feel like it was the Kroll, Texas storm a couple years ago.
Was that April 21st or
It was in early June or late
okay,
May. Produced a tornado that went through. I can't think of the town's name. Lockett, is it Lockett?
something like that?
Um,
There's
Usually
also
I
one
remember
in
this
April,
stuff, but
like
it looked like a rock concert out on a
right.
farm field
Yeah.
with the amount of cars.
Hmm.
And so we didn't deploy an instrument. I was like, man, this is just I can't get off the road and feel
Right.
good about this. It's more just being aware. So I tell our team, like, just please, like, be careful with drivers. That becomes our biggest threat,
Absolutely.
is that.
Hmm.
But then lightning was the only time I think I've ever like yelled at the team. We had an instant. I could hear the audible buzz
Right.
on the radio antenna, and then one of our scientists who's also on our science communication team, Christina's hair was starting to stand up. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I just started yelling at everybody, get back in the vehicle. And
Right.
um, that was our lightning experience.
Yeah, that's
But
like, oh, and I feel like our vehicle, I just feel like it'll be hit by lightning at some point. And, at least we're going to have this big aluminum deal on top, and it should
yeah,
hit that and go around everything. And we're not going to have anything connected to it comes inside. No wires. A
yes,
couple of
yeah.
people, you got to put
Yeah.
this, you got to put that. I'm like, nope, I don't want to give any more
Yeah,
opportunity.
no path to
Right.
anything inside, and I think that's pretty smart too. It's and that's it. It's
What
you know
about
that it,
tornadoes, though? I mean, these supercells, and Greg Nordstrom's going to go with me the first couple of times to kind of help me, from Mississippi State, and he's got a lot of experience out with severe weather, and I just, we're gonna have a few ground rules, like we're not going into an active tornado warned because all the other chasers are coming. There's just going to be a set of rules, but you know, I know a lot more about hurricanes
yeah,
than I
yeah,
do
yeah.
this.
And the one thing I think, I would always caution anybody who's going to be around the hail. Like you could find yourself in a situation where a storm does become tornadic,
Mhm.
and you're north of that tornadic circulation, but you're well prepared for hail. Most people, in a safety sake, it's counterintuitive to turn yourself around and go into the big hail and get yourself out of the way instead of trying to cut in front of a tornado or try to beat it to a point, which is not a good idea if you can't really get a good handle on its vector. So that's but you guys you have the ability to easily do that, and it's also your goal.
Yeah,
Is the hail side of things, but I've also found, I lend myself. I'm a dry line nut. Like I'm the big hailers are always the supercells down the dry line, and I
good.
think I have almost. I think our team might even tell me like, Ian, you bias yourself a little too much. But I'll tell you what, for hail, I'm going to go pick a dry line target rather than a warm front that I know has a higher tornado potential
Sure.
because of the boundary itself.
Yeah,
Um, because I need for science part a good discrete storm. I don't need a mess of convection is a just awful from a
yeah,
science
yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
Um, so that's sort of our strategies, but
Dry line.
and I would caution folks to try not hail. You never know when the random big stone could happen, so be real careful in and out of the vehicle.
We're going to be
Um,
really. Oh yeah, that's the other thing is like,
yeah,
when is it over? And because we want to start collecting stuff
yeah.
from up top, and like, like
Yeah, some
TJ
days that
gonna bring a
gradient is
helmet.
real tight,
All
and
right.
other days there is a big old random big stone that comes flying out. The northwest
Okay, we will
flow
bring the
days are
helmet.
also the ones where big
Yes.
hail gets flung out into the inflow too. Those are the ones that I gotta watch out with our team. It's
All
like you get just a bit of northwest flow aloft, and some big hailstones start flinging out into the inflow, and you're like, "Oh, where? How far south do I got to go to get out of this?"
Wow. Yeah, because I figure when it's over, because we're not going to be driving, we want to pull over,
Yep, and
have the thing
stop.
run over us, right? So it's an intercept. And um, then when it's over, we want to get out and start collecting, measuring, photographing, all the stuff I've learned from you. And then I feel like it's generally done. I know you can have another opportunity. Um, and that's stuff we'll learn about, like how many supercells could we possibly get in one day,
Yeah,
whatever. But again, the isolated discrete ones
yeah.
are what we're after. I had something I was going to bring up. What was it? Um, yeah, and I know CJ was talking about having a helmet, and I kept telling him, "No, we're not going to need a helmet. If we're building this big hail cage, it'll be fine. And we're not getting out during it." But I think what you said, that random one, and all it takes is one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're good. You get out, and you could even have the sun shining through the cirrus
Hmm.
top, and then who knows, man? Just that one bonk and in a bad place. What was the dry line. So Greg was telling me, because we got the Herbie thing for hurricanes. He said, wouldn't it be amazing if you could launch that weather balloon with the two GoPros? And it does have not really a sounding device per se. It's pretty low sample rate. It's 6 observations per minute, and it's a flight Eagle flight computer from High Altitude Science. So we're going to get 6 temperature, humidity, dew point. I think that's every, oh, an altimeter. So, 6 samples a minute. Not the best, but it's better than nothing. And really neat, like right before the dry line erupts, as soon as you start to see the signs,
Yeah.
launch that thing. And this goes to 100,000 feet. So you get sort of, a poor man's sounding. I say poor man's, I mean, those are pretty inexpensive to buy, but I don't have the equipment to receive a sounding. And that's a whole other issue. But anyway, launch that thing to the stratosphere, get the 2 GoPros on there. And we've learned through all the testing we've done, we've tested almost 15 times. And once you get to about 80,000 feet, it basically levels out. And it's just like this gradual, like amazing gradual turning. And you have 2 cameras just to see the dry line erupt from 18 miles above the earth.
So that to me is being able to physically look down on the cap. And often, I mean, you
Love the
see
way
it
you put
yeah,
things.
you see it in
That's it.
in satellite imagery too, where you have the deep moisture to the east where you can it's that hazy condition. Sometimes you get the blowing dust on that other side of that boundary too. And to be able to sort of see that, it's one thing I use those satellite imageries to teach and sort of talk about the air mass differences, but you'd be able to see that in even that sort of low Earth orbit is sort
Right.
of the what I it's even lower than that.
Sure.
But you could it'll give you this visual on how those dry line circulations sort of how do they look? Because the one thing we still sort of struggle there is these small convergence maxima that actually are usually the things that force the towering Q through the
Right.
cap.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of reasons behind why they exist. But
Right.
to be able to look down on a
Right.
length of Q along a dry line and to visually like see that hazy deep moisture off on one side
Yeah.
and maybe it's perfectly clear on the other, or maybe there's blowing dust back there.
Yeah.
Um,
While we're out there,
would just be fascinating.
yeah, and it would look amazing, and there might be some really neat science to extract out of that. I think it's worth a shot, and it gives us an opportunity to test. The project again is we got to test and test and test to be ready for the eye of a hurricane. We did it once during Hurricane Nate, where we launched it in the eye, and that was in 2017. It was like midnight, and it made it to about 55,000 feet. And for some reason, the balloon burst early. We might have overfilled it. I don't know, but we got some. Our lowest temperature was minus 109 Fahrenheit. I don't remember what that was, like minus 70 Celsius or something. Um, and I think that was right around 50,000, 55,000 feet. It was a lot colder than I was expecting, and it was a
Yeah.
very unusual track. It was really amazing to launch into the eye of a hurricane all the way up. And we do have GoPro video, and you can see Biloxi and D'Iberville kind of disappearing, and then you get the moon. It was like a few days past full. So technically, we're the only people that have ever launched these guys into the eye of a hurricane through a weather balloon, but you didn't see anything.
Yeah, you can't see. So
It's like, come on.
this reminds me. And so back my PhD dissertation was actually using it was a hurricane dropsonde data.
Mhm,
And one particular it was the Katrina flight.
mhm.
And it was the landfall mission. And Peter Dodge, who passed away a couple of
Yeah,
years ago, Peter was a HRD scientist for NOAA and was on that flight and told me they were trying to hit one of our Texas Tech towers with a sonde.
yeah,
And I didn't realize what that meant.
right.
So they launched the sonde about halfway
Sure.
upwind around the eye wall to
Yep.
let it spot. I saw the 3D trajectory in my dissertation when I'm doing the data analysis. I'm like, oh,
Amazing.
that's Peter's sonde. And it landed. It was the Bay St. Louis Airport tower that I think it was We Might too. The
We
sun
might
landed
have a
within like 400 yards of the tower. I'm like, Peter, how did you do that? The thing
remarkable.
went halfway around the eye wall and you landed it with it's like I'm usually not that good. I'm like, oh my gosh, like
Wow.
that was to watch the trajectory. I was like, these guys clearly understand the
Next time I see
trajectory
Stan
of these things.
Goldenberg, I'm going to ask him about that. Stan and I,
I couldn't believe it.
that's incredible. That is really amazing. Wow. Well, I think we could do that with the Herbie payload, and right as the dry line is getting ready to go, Greg will help consult about like, all right, when do we do it? But we got to like, it's windy out there, and
It is.
we're not
Uh,
talking about a little styrofoam cup and a
yeah.
200 or 300 gram weather balloon. the payload is, 3 or 4 pounds, and the balloon is a 1,500 gram weather balloon, and we need about 180 cubic feet of helium to make it go. And you've seen the shots of weather balloons from,
Yes.
you know,
Yes. You get
sites.
the right day with some good strong surface flow, and it is a bear
Yeah.
to hold on to those things and to get them up.
Yes.
To
Yeah,
to
you got
to
it.
find a spot with
Right.
that's unobstructed
Yeah.
with nothing several hundred yards
Yep.
downwind.
Yep.
Um,
It's
that's a challenge.
that's the way I look at it. Let's give it. We're going to bring the helium, and bring the payload. We're going to go out there. We're going to have everything and do the best we can. Have a whole bunch of ideas and experiments, and again, show the world. And literally, you know how social media it is. Does that mean a million people are going to watch what we're doing? No, but enough people from we got followers in Europe. You know how it is, Ian. It's like, yes, you truly can show the world, even if it's not a billion views on
Yeah.
YouTube. That's not what I'm after. I'm after enough people engaging and watching it and inspiring them, and just like, wow. And maybe we learn something along the way. We can help contribute to the science and stay out of the way of the tornado trackers, because those guys, like, hey, look, tornadoes are amazing. I agree. But this zero metering stuff, I don't know if it's because I'm 53 or what, but I don't want to have any part of that. I'll go for the zero metering with the hail, because I'm going to have a vehicle that's ready for it. At least I hope.
Yeah, years ago, tornadoes never were. Um, I don't know. For me, it just they are fascinating. They're really neat to watch. But yeah, I don't get it. I love the I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe I've just gotten old, but I love the big picture of what that environment looks like in all its full view of
Right.
everything. And yeah, maybe I'm old and boring.
And this
Okay.
is not an indictment
Um,
on what they're doing. I mean,
yeah.
it's not, but it's just not, it doesn't scratch that itch for me that it does for them. That's what's all it is. And I really hope people stay safe. And that's a concern with as more and more people. And boy, after Twisters comes out, you think the one in '96 inspired a bunch of people? After July, at least it comes out July 25th, and we're
That's
pretty
true. That's true. We'll be they'll let the Canadians deal with that. But
right.
so yeah, this will happen again. For the positive, we will inspire a whole new generation of meteorologists with this
Right.
movie. But then it will create what it does, and I do worry. Like, and this is sort of the environment we live in. That um, I just don't. We have become an extreme sport, and I do understand why people do extreme sports, and that's not me.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it is what it is, and I I just hope we don't see the negative consequences start
Right.
rearing its head in mass.
Right.
And then I do worry. I think sometimes just some of the lengths some people go to drive distances with no sleep, it just
Yeah.
really
I know.
scares me.
I, I mean, I think the objectification of the weather, and that's the right term for it, that it's become this object, and it's a picture trophy, and there's like, it's lost its something, the magic or whatever, because it
Yeah,
has objectified, and likes and views and the drama, and you get these YouTube video thumbnails of, and here I am starting to sound like I'm indicting it, but you know, I appreciate it on a different scale. Not that these people do, anyway, that's a whole other, that's
yeah, I have my get off my lawn moments for sure. Um, but it weather is an interesting space. It's one of those places where you can have a hobbyist and a
mm,
scientist who's doing cutting edge stuff in the same spot at the same time,
right.
and both enjoying the exact same thing for a
Agreed.
very different reason potentially. And there's not a lot in the earth sciences that have that.
True.
And I'll say that's actually a positive, especially in today's world. But again, there's also there's the positives, negatives come with everything. I did think
Yes.
about that,
Right.
and maybe I'm just a more laid back these days. But yeah, that's what it is, and um, maybe that's why Hale's been such a neat place to be, because
Right.
for the longest time, I don't think anybody cared. But then people are like, man, these things are cool, and they're
Mhm.
all kind of different, and they're falling from the sky, and we can all see it. Like we can all, I don't know. It's fascinated me for sure, and it even at this stage, getting to I am the realization I'm not in early career, and I'm in the mid career, and at least I don't think I'm in late career
Right.
yet. Uh,
Well, I know what I'm going to title this first episode of this limited edition series, the Hale Project podcast, because you
get
got
off my lawn.
subtitle. It's going to go back what I said earlier. You got to have catchy title. It's going to be kinetic energy, no, hydrometeorites, kinetic energy, and money, or something like that.
And dollar bills,
Right, and
dollar bills into landfills and
I should throw
dumpsters.
that into Dolly and see what kind of an AI. Create a thumbnail for YouTube that's got hydrometeorites, kinetic energy, and dollars. Well, I got to wrap it up so that I can produce the front end of this for everybody. But boy, oh boy, what an amazing time I have had with you doing this conversation. Hopefully, people learned a lot. Hopefully, people are inspired, especially the citizen aspect to this, to gather information out there as it's happening. We'll certainly encourage people to follow your work on social media. IBHS.org is the website for IBHS. It has been there since 2010, just a few hours from me. And the first time I went there was just a few weeks ago. One of those, where has that been all my life? But everything came together. I got to meet you, and here we are tonight.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for having me. It's been a wonderful evening, really just diving into the deep end of Hale and really all sorts of topics too. So yeah, everybody, please give us a follow out there on social media. Follow us on our project. And Mark, I hope to run into you at the Holiday Inn Express in Childress, Texas, or perhaps Waukene, Kansas, maybe Norfolk, Nebraska, all those places along the way.
Allsups out there. You got Brahms, the ice
Oh Brahms and
cream.
milkshakes. That's my weakness out there.
Freddy's started in Kansas. The Freddy's burger place,
Oh yeah.
and but we got to stay healthy too. So we got to watch all that.
Yeah, I gotta get my with on my team is our actually applied economist Hank Pogorzelski. He's been with me since we started. He always drives my vehicle,
Right.
and Hank's a Culver's fan. He loves
Oh yeah.
Culver's out there because he doesn't have one in the
Right.
Tampa area where he lives.
Well, Ian, if I may call it, I mean, you got the PhD, it's the respect thing, but Dr. Giammanco, thank you for spending time with me and our audience tonight. We appreciate it. Best of luck out there, and we'll see you out in Hale Alley before too long.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark, for having me, and thanks everybody out there for giving a listen.